Hello and welcome to the solar shed. I've got a new backdrop. We've changed the panel. It's quite an old one. It's got a glass back on it. It's very heavy. So we thought we'd put it on this wall. But listen, you probably noticed the penguin as well. Don't know if you've picked up on it through the social media we're doing, but for the last 15 years, my company, the Solar Shed, has adopted the penguin as its emblem because every solar system that goes up stops the ice from melting and the penguin gets saved. And who doesn't like a little flippy flappy fella? So I'm really proud to announce that we've now adopted the penguin as our emblem across the whole of the solar nation. So there's now 60 solar companies who are all going to adopt the penguin, and that's going to come everywhere with me. It's not a helium one as well. So it's not going to blow away. It's going to stay on the ground and we can look after Percy the penguin. So there we go. Every time you go solar, you're going to save another colony of penguins. Anyway, that's enough about the penguins. Today's podcast is a really, really special one. So I want you to make yourself comfortable. You might want to pause it a couple of times because it's going to be an hour chat. And I'm going to introduce you, please, to Andrew Baird from Planet Solar Consulting.
Hello there.
Andy, come on in and sit down.
Thank
Great
you
to
very
see you. Let me introduce Andy to you. Andy has been, it started off as a virtual mate. We met each other during question time on Twitter back in about 2008, 2009. When I discovered Twitter, I was already just in solar. Andy was just setting up his Planet Solar Consulting, or Planet Solar at the time.
It was a solar installation business.
Over in Northern Ireland. Andy's got a really interesting background because whilst I'm in now my 18th year, I think Andy's now in his 21st year in solar. So without any further ado, over to Andy. Where did you start? How did this all start? Where, before Planet Solar come along, before Andy Baird, the legend that is, where did you start? Where was your foundation in this industry?
Yeah, so I guess the beginning is biology, surprisingly, rather than engineering and business. So I was always a very keen biologist. Pursued that through college, through university.
Yeah.
So my first job was as a biologist within the pest control industry.
Right.
That is an industry where pesticides use, misuse, profligate use is very much the way it operates. So right from the off, my focus was how do we actually reduce pesticide usage to deal with these issues in all of the big cities, the hospitals, London, etc. Rather than using by pesticides, but by applying the fundamentals of biology and pest management.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was always there, and that served me very, very well. And some of the stories I could share, some of what you see, it's kind of an access all areas type role.
Obviously not as in depth, but in the solar industry, as you progress over the years, you've actually had quite a lot of interest in pest management as well.
Yes.
So I mean, obviously, when we go out on a big roof and you're being attacked by seagulls,
exactly,
we've got to sort that out.
There's an overlap there.
One of the roofers I'm aware of, his practices on the grapevine, he'd take inflatable footballs and put them into seagull nests that haven't got eggs or chicks in, to stop them from nesting on pre-site surveys and all the rest of it. Little things like that. They don't like our seagulls. I remember going up the roof one day. Rob the roofer's up there, and he says, "Kev, come up." And I was downstairs in my van making a cup of tea because my van is seagull one. So I go up there with my phone, up the ladder, onto this big roof, and Rob's there with a panel shielding himself from a seagull's dive bombing him.
Scary.
Yeah, this was the first. And the reason was that the seagulls, we'd already done the factory next door and it was very close proximity. And they thought that Rob was where the nests were around the solar panels. Yeah.
Rob
so
under attack.
So me being me, the first thing I did was got my camera out and filmed it. And what brilliant it was. That went viral. That did.
Yes.
Yeah, poor old Rob.
Gets the
so back to the point about the biology. Sorry, I do apologize.
But no, from that, moved to Northern Ireland 2000. Tried to get anaerobic digestion going. So that's a really, really interesting technology. Now,
knowing the sort of people who might be watching this, got to be very careful when we talk about renewables in Northern Ireland, haven't we?
Right.
Well, it skinted your government.
Right.
They went into meltdown for 3 years.
Yeah, with the boiler, cash for
renewable heat incentive. It was nicknamed Cash for Ash or Ash for Cash, wasn't it?
Cash for Ash. And it literally was.
All they needed to do was cap the amount of energy generated. Like in England, it was capped at whatever £1,000. That's all they needed to do. You had these rich old farmers buying £200,000 worth of biomass, sticking it into open sheds and heating the planet just to earn money.
Yeah. Now it has been written in detail. There's a book, Burnt, that describes just
Who wrote that?
The shot. That was one of our local journalists, McBride,
Right.
Guy McBride. But no, shocking, because the whole idea obviously was reducing carbon, sustainable heat generation, and the whole thing was both configured from a policy level and in terms of implementation just to generate income. So it increased carbon emissions through basically profligate burning of fuels, increased distribution of fuels, because that's the one thing when you have distributed fuel, combustion-based fuel versus more centralized networks. There's basically a high footprint in delivering the primary fuel, but literally burning it to earn an income. So, I mean, that thing was pretty much a disaster. But the anaerobic digestion is an interesting technology in that you're taking a waste cost center and an energy cost center and essentially converging the two and potentially turning it into a profit center. But it was a very challenging space to develop. There wasn't a lot of it going on. And
I should imagine at the time when the political turmoil was going on, because it was all over the news over here and all sorts, I should imagine anything that had government incentives attached to it or any new policies going out would be, you were battering the mindset of what was going on. Oh, you're going to skint our bloody country.
It killed policy for years. It left a very bad taste. But I think the way it kind of got out of hand, the assumption was within our local assembly that the main capital, the main funding was coming from central government, but it didn't. It came out of our block grant, so suddenly we'd kind of bankrupted Northern Ireland.
And they needed to rewrite the encyclopedias about the flat Earth. Your politicians over there, didn't they?
Well,
so we weren't going to go down the political route.
There are some colourful perspectives.
There are,
let's say,
creationists,
but it was very difficult to get anaerobic digestion going because of a policy framework. And what was quite interesting, this is at the time we're all members of the EU.
Yep.
So in terms of policy and the primary legislation that is there to deliver the policy, everyone's working off exactly the same thing. And within particularly biodigesters, the receiving of basically animal feeds and waste and what have you, you have this thing called the Animal Byproducts Regulations.
Yeah.
So it's a standardized piece of legislation. And one of the most, I would say, interesting myths of the case to depart the European Union was this idea of red tape. So around anaerobic digestion, you have this piece of legislation, animal byproducts regulations, and we're all working to the same thing. So the French, the Spanish, the Austrians, the Germans, it's almost like a pamphlet, a simple guide. And that enabled an industry to sort of develop and grow, and certainly a more positive sort of planning regime. Here in the UK, that very same animal byproducts regulation, rather than being a simple guide or pamphlet, you have volumes and volumes and volumes of legislation. So immediately you have this barrier. And then making the point, because policy always gets things going, but that policy needs to be very simple and very deliverable. Yes. And when everyone's working from the same legislation, to have made such a meal of making it so complicated and essentially prohibitive.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Kind of stunted the growth.
That's quite interesting. I've not heard that as a reason why Brexit changed things.
Yeah.
And obviously it has there. I mean, from our point of view, it was the wholesalers that had to negotiate the import, export, the delivery, and everything to do with the supply chain. We still buy the same products from the same wholesalers and put them onto people's houses. So, from my point of view, it never caught. Other than what I believed personally, in profession, it never affected our business. I've not had to increase or anything. But listen, go back to the biology. So, what was the transition point in the late 90s, early 2000s?
Yes, it's early 2000s.
So 2002, you say you went over to Northern Ireland?
2000. So we had probably 2 to 3 years of trying to get anaerobic digestion going. Interestingly, it wasn't just standard anaerobic digestion where you got a big vat, you throw everything in, and a month later you've generated your gas. These were high rate reactors. So if you think of distillery waste, brewery waste, things that are basically aqueous, high COD, which is your chemical oxygen demand, which is a measure of the pollution, quite a lot of carbohydrate, all this stuff, we could basically achieve about an 80% reduction in COD, the pollution load, in sometimes 5 or 6 hours as this passed through this high rate reactor. You've still got some upstream processing and preparation, some downstream final polishing, but this was modular. So you can
scalable.
replicate it.
Yeah.
60 meter cube vessels, basically multiplied to deal with the volume of the stream. So really, really interesting technology. So that was my first dipping into toe. I mean, these were guys that had been doing this thing in the 80s.
And that was a natural thing from the biology into the science and into the technology.
And an understanding of modularity.
So where was the link with solar? Because in the year 2000, we all know you couldn't generate electricity from the sun in England. Some people actually still believe that. They still believe it.
There was a handful of people doing it, but it was literally...
And our industry didn't start as such until 2010 under the old Labour government, when the Clean Energy Cashback Scheme, most people know it as the feed-in tariff scheme, when that started. So you've got an 8-year period there where you're over in Northern Ireland, making a new life with the fact. Is your wife from Northern Ireland?
Yeah, Belfast girl. Yeah.
Right, okay. So
we met in Manchester.
That was when you were at university. Right, okay.
Nicholas Fine Art degree.
She's abstracted you out of the country. And
that was always the plan. My first trip over that first summer in 1990. There was fishing, there was whiskey, an amazing landscape, wonderful people.
Fishing, whiskey, and good landscape.
So, yeah.
Mate, all that's missing is a blues harp and a sunset, and I'll be sitting there. That sounds idyllic. Well, we've just been up on the river, just sitting up there in the sun, watching the tide go out, and it is nice just to we've known each other for years. We've only met. This is only the second time we've met in all those years.
Shed.
But we have a couple of hours on the phone
every year.
Once a year, we'll have a couple of hours, and it's family and work and all the rest. It's good for the soul. But you're a couple of years younger than me. I think 4 years younger, and we're following a very similar sort of life journey, aren't we? Yeah. Your wife is the homemaker. Yeah. You allow her to stay at home to do that. The same here.
Well, she's an artist. Primarily, she's an artist. Yeah. So that's certainly how Nick's professional career.
The house is the life is your family and house, isn't it?
The garden and the home are an extension in many ways of Nicola's creative process.
So, okay.
We're very, very fortunate.
So like we have, over the last 18 years, nearly 18, 17 years, we counted up in November, 1,500 people, that's families or singles or couples here at the Solar Shed, to walk around our garden, to see the fruit beds, the irrigation, the composting, the wood storage, the thermal solar, the people, all the things that we've done, because we're a lifestyle business. We show people how we live with this technology and show them the easy process that we've put in place to make life simple and cheaper and more wholesome. It's the escape to the country, come all those other programs that people look at. We've done it. Was that never an option for you? Because you've got an office at home and Nick's got her studio and you've got your art form in your garden.
It's not a closed shop, but it's quite a private, personal space with no neighbours. So over the years, people would certainly come up, see the solar on the roof, the infrared heating panels in the dining room, and we would do deals at the dining room table because you had a working example.
That's exactly what we've done. Obviously, we was a bit more control. You were taking the opportunity if someone needed that extra reassurance, you'd bring them home.
Yes,
which is okay.
And it's been important for Nick because Nick has a studio at home.
Yep.
So people, in terms of visiting her, I mean, it's I would say quite a private space. It's not a personal artist studio. It's quite different to an office.
Yeah.
But I would say she's also...
It's where they lose themselves.
Absolutely. And the whole creative process is very, very different.
And you don't want anybody else's karma in there, do you? Yeah. So I was just wondering why you never... as in, you've got the technology on your home. You know about the soil, you know about the seeds, the plant. Just wonder why you stayed on the solar and the consultant rather than going down the eco environmental.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of we were picking out how to actually get into the solar, because the anaerobic digestion was heavy engineering, process chemistry, complicated.
Yeah, you can't do that.
I love simplicity.
Right.
But I understood from that couple of years the idea of modular technology being scalable to basically any challenge or problem. And I was looking for simplicity, and that's when I read Half Gone, Dr. Jeremy Leggett's book, describing basically and introducing to me at least the idea of peak oil. And
Jeremy Leggett, if you're not aware, was the founder of Solar Century. He was big involved in Solar Aid, the charity. Did he help found it?
He founded Solar Aid in 2007 and it was written into the memorandum of articles of Solar Century's business, that basically as soon as they entered profitability, 5% of operating profits would
Goes,
be invested
we've
in
got
SolarAid.
we're just about to adopt SolarAid in the Solar Nation, so it's nationally the whole of the Solar Nation network. All of the installers will have the opportunity to promote.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping Gary Brantwood from Perfect Sense Energy up in the Northwest. He's a big supporter. I have been over the years. I've been more of a supporter than a financial donator. I have donated over the years. But yeah, it really is wonderful. They work in about 5 or 6 different African countries, as where you've got a lot of people who are living by kerosene, and you know they might spend 2 months of their wages over the course of a year on their kerosene, where the kerosene, because especially in equatorial areas where you get 12 hours daylight, 12 hours nighttime, there's a lot of darkness. And it's very hard for health centres who are off the grid, schools, education establishments, kids doing homework. And when they are leaning over the kerosene lanterns, it's the eye damage, it's the lung damage from breathing in the kerosene.
There's fire risk.
Because they're
Major
all
fire
literally mud
risk.
huts and straw. But there's a lot of mud huts
and
and
it
straw.
emits black carbon.
Yes.
So this is like, is it 20
It's
or
almost
200
like
times more potent as a heat trapping?
So the SolarAid, it does the entrepreneurship, doesn't it? So I first found out of SolarAid when they were literally taking people out of when people were leaving the orphanages, and they were literally teaching them how to sell. So they would give them maybe 10 lights to start with, little solar powered lights. They'd give them 10 and they would have to go and sell them. And then they'd buy the next 10 at half price. And then they've built up a business and they were shown how to, and then there was repairs on some things they were doing.
Yeah, the genius was, there was a guy, Derry Newman, that came in. And it was him that came up with the concept of Sunny Money. So
That's it, the Sunny Money.
Derry Newman's background was Sony. So what was really interesting, he was involved.
Sony, the big company.
Yeah, in Wales.
Right, okay, very quickly. In Wales, I've just posted this morning on LinkedIn, Daniel Crossland from Photon Project Management, big Solar Nation installer in South Wales. He's done the Sony build. Now, Sony have got enough room for 8 megawatts on the roof, but they've got to do structural stuff first. So Dan's been told to clad the whole of the outside of the building. They're putting roadways in, they're putting walls in and fences, all with solar panels. That's Sony. If you want to support a company who's manufacturing in Britain, embrace the net zero, and they're supporting British industry, including Solar Nation members, by Sony. Sorry, go on.
Was that Sony in Wales?
Yes.
Right, so the Sony factory in Wales used to produce cathode ray TVs, and now we live in a world of
flat screens and chips.
So Derry Newman, there's 2 strokes of genius. Firstly, the C21E tile, basically the world's best.
So right, this is a solar tile. This is what Solar Century were famed for. 20 years ago, they had a solar tile before Elon Musk could even spell climate change. And I doubt whether he bloody well could today. So
this robot had been essentially decommissioned because no one bought cathode ray TVs anymore. So Derry recommissioned the cathode ray TV robot to basically assemble the C21 tile. So you had the sun power.
So it was a recycled robot that built a solar panel that was going to...
Exactly, and that's the beauty.
I love that.
So it's a complete...
circular. I love that.
What it was, the world's...
So what's his name?
Derry Newman.
Derry Newman. Well, remember that name. There's the innovator for you.
So there's this lovely sort of value engineering of the whole production of those tiles. But interestingly, it was Derry that came up with Sunny Money, because the view was, look, we were giving away a lot of lamps and you get a certain level of traction. His view was, look, people need to kind of make a buying decision to value what we're doing. So he came up with the whole idea of this microeconomic model whereby rather than just donating and giving stuff away.
There's no value in anything that's free.
Exactly.
There's no value.
So make almost an investment decision to divert your kerosene money into a cleaner, more sustainable.
Because they could do the lights on pay monthly sort of thing as well.
There was a whole range of different models, but it was that idea: move away from just giving stuff and donating, because there's very little value attached to what you give away. Versus, and now you've got like micro entrepreneurial activity right across these.
Well, I mean, you've now got loads of different projects. We've got a couple of our members. I mean, look at Damien Barker from Renergy. He's got a big solar operation in Africa. Nick, not member, but Yorico down in the southwest. He's got interests abroad. He's got solar companies he's taken elsewhere, doing a lot of community stuff in the townships and the villages. But one of the biggest benefits for me is not just for health and all the rest of it, is if we can put refrigeration and cooling into the health centres, if we can put projectors and PCs into the schools, the people are going to become, if we've got solar wells and water pumping for irrigation, for where the desertification there, where it's stopping the deserts from encroaching. If they need electricity to pump water and all this other stuff, we can start to build those communities that have been affected by famine and drought, which a lot of it is affected because of the political turmoil rather than just the climate. It's the policies aren't put in place, but people can actually take control if they're generating energy and they can create an economy. Why would there be a need to migrate? Without the cost of not doing it. This is why we've got people on boats and traversing halfway across the world for safe haven. Whereas solar could actually be a solution. Here we go. I've never come up with solar could be solar. We know that solar is a solution to most of the world's problems. I think we've just sorted out the immigration problem, mate. Why don't we give every village in Africa and Asia free electricity through solar panels? Sorted. Job's good. Right, lovely. Let's go. It's amazing how it affects every part of life all over the world, isn't it?
Well, solar is kind of the key survival technology.
Well, no sunlight, no planting, no growth.
I mean, there's not a lot you can't solarize if you acknowledge that electrification of heat, power and transport is the end game. And I think we've kind of worked that out. We've at least got to that.
It's how we get there and how quick we get there and what damage is done in the meantime.
And while solar isn't the silver bullet and it can't do it in isolation, it is the key to it, and by some margin. Firstly, relatively simple to design and install.
Solar is, it doesn't matter if it's off-grid or on-grid or at scale, solar is the quickest energy source to deploy. The quickest.
Fast, simple, jobs rich. I mean, it's just win, 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 win. I think where the industry has a bit of work to do, and it's certainly doing this now, it's acknowledging that everything has a footprint. And there is nothing that is just completely clean. So we're cleaner than all of the alternatives.
My argument, well, of course there is, and it would be stupid of us to try and argue against those who say, "Oh, you've got a footprint." We're always talking about the lithium. They're always talking about where you get your minerals from. Obviously, we've got our schemes in place. There's full traceability. You've got B Corp companies. You've got the solar stewardship initiative we talked about before.
PV cycle at the end.
PV cycle at the end. So we've got. There's actually a company in Germany that makes solar panels 100% out of recycled solar panels. It already exists on the Dutch-German borders. Already exists. But what I like to remind people is, look, when I'm talking about EVs with people, and they say, "Oh, your batteries, the road pollutant, and rubber because they're heavier." I wonder what paper they've been reading. Make up your own mind. Don't let your mind be made up. But my argument back now is, look, you're saying that the climate damage, the environmental damage caused by mining minerals that are going to be formed into a product which is going to be used for 30 years is worse than burning abstracting the oil that we have to send kids to war over. We then burn for you to propel yourself a few miles. Then we have to extract more oil for you to burn to go. When you start saying it like that, it soon changes people's outlook. Actually, we burn it once. We mine it once. We cause the environmental damage once, not every time we get in the car. It's embedded carbon, and it stays there until that car's not used anymore.
That said,
then the batteries, everything is 100% recyclable. Anything that's made of metal, anything that's made of metal is 100% recyclable.
I mean, the industry is making good progress with this now. I mean, certainly. I've always worked very closely with JA Solar, so they have this fantastic.
Well, you say that it's very modest. You actually.
Well, I had a 20-month contract, sort of working, getting they had a renewable energy support scheme. So Ireland was very late, as in the south of Ireland, very late to solar, which was frustrating in sort of the mid-2000s when there was very few projects. But they probably timed it really well, because when solar became very affordable and before peak grid supplied electricity prices bit, they were kind of just getting going. So it took them a while to catch up and build.
So they've seen the market, they've seen it.
They didn't get in early.
They've got a nice stability rather than having to go through the shocks and the solar coaster.
Exactly. And all the hard work in terms of a cost down
That's what we always said
We're
about
done.
back in 2010. We let the Germans and the French and the Spanish make all the mistakes first.
Yeah.
Our feed-in tariff actually took the best elements of some, and we ignored what other countries were doing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we were quite cute in that respect. We were the last. People think, we kickstarted all. We were the last of the 27 member states at the time to start a feed-in tariff, which basically started our industry.
Yeah.
So at that time, you were then with Solar Century.
Yeah. So Solar Century was 2005 to 2010, and
we didn't have an industry. What on earth were you selling?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So the very first project, because social housing was always a big part of that.
Yep. Was this photovoltaic? It was all photovoltaic, or did you do thermal?
Yeah, it was all PV.
Because I got in 2008, and it was thermal.
Yeah.
But it was easy to sell because the oil wars were going on, and we live in a off the gas grid area, so the correlation was there.
Plus, with solar thermal,
you save penguins,
you go out all
kids from being
day,
all.
you haven't put anything on, and you get home and there's a tank of hot water. It's a very tangible benefit. Whereas you go out all day and you've generated 8, 9, 10 kilowatts of electricity
and it's all good
on a meter. It doesn't mean a great deal.
No, it doesn't. Especially when you've been out, and we didn't have batteries in those days.
But a tank of hot water, you can see.
Well, we used to sell it. We used to sell it. We used to sell thermal as we used to sell the thermal and say about the thermal store. Think of it as a liquid battery.
Yeah.
And all it's going to do is store heat.
Yes.
In that water for you to use. Doesn't matter what tap it is, it's going to come out of there.
Yeah.
And it was a very simple. So it was very expensive technology for what it does. But when oil prices were up at 78 pence a litre, in fact, it got up to over 78 pence a litre in the 2008, 2009. Yeah, it was an easy sell. And then when oil drops to 28 pence a litre, it's hard work.
Yeah.
It's hard work.
Well, that first project was C21E tiles. That was kind of our baby. There was a hardcore group. There was Simon Gerrard, Alison Shelton, Carl Cook, and Rebecca Raspin holding it all together.
I was speaking to Carl last week. He said Carl visited here years ago with some guy from South Korea.
Right.
It might have been JA Solar.
Yeah, well, he dipped into on the inverter manufacturing.
He did, and then he's now back into car charging and EVs.
Yeah. But a real great hardcore team, and we lived and we breathed C21E tiles. And our view of the world was.
He was also one of our original Twitter mates from Thursday nights on Question. This is going back 15 years now. I didn't realise Carl worked with you as well.
Great guy.
But he's been at the Solar Shed.
But this was a hardcore team. But that very first project I did in Northern Ireland. 18.72 kilowatts, and it was 168 grand.
Hold on. 18 kilowatts.
0.72. 0.72.
And it was
168,000 pounds plus VAT.
Right. Okay. Right. 18 kilowatts today. We can do, depending on the quality of product. If it was all on one roof, 18 kilowatts we could do for less than £20,000.
Yeah.
So
we didn't have a very strong economic case to make, and electricity prices were lower. People paying 6-7p a unit.
When I got my solar system here, my 8 panels, people thought I was mad, right? Because I paid £6,000 at cost price at the time, right?
Yeah.
And that was when I was in the trade. We were selling it for like 7.5.
Yeah.
So I paid me £5,500, £6,000 for my solar panels, my 8 panels plugged in here. I was paying 11 pence a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
But I've kept daily data of my energy production for 14 years of that system. Yeah. When I go and see customers, I talk about my energy generation and I say, look, let me explain to you. I says that energy, the value of it there was worth £300 a year. Today, it's worth £900 a year. The same amount of energy, but that's the value of it.
Yeah.
So when people say, what's your payback period? I say, what's the energy cost going to be in 6 years' time? They haven't got a clue. What's the cloud cover going to be? Let me show you what has happened to me. And every time there was one year I got 100% increase 3-4 years ago because prices went from 22 pence to 44 pence.
Yeah.
I got 100% increase in my savings. 100% increase in savings on something I'd already spent money on.
Yeah.
My stress was, where am I going to spend the extra savings?
Yes.
Not where am I going to find the extra money?
Yeah.
It's amazing. So 18, well, going back to 2010 then.
Yeah. So there was a gradual, basically the whole model used to be as manufacturing capacity doubles, it yields about, it was sort of percentage, about half production cost would fall. So double capacity. the price was roughly sort of half, but it was all prohibitively expensive.
Yes.
So even half price.
Which is why we needed the feed-in tariffs, and we were the last of the European states.
Yeah. But it did halve over that time. So that 5 years, we literally went from about 8, 9, 10,000 pounds per kilowatt peak installed to hovering around 5,000. And then the very first feed-in tariff funded major rollout program in the UK was South Yorkshire Housing Association.
Right.
Lead architect was this guy Roger with his sidekick Craig. Real champions, real frontier pioneers of solar, trying to standardise it on social housing new build when it was prohibitively expensive. And the brief to get that project launched was, if you can hit a benchmark of 4.5 grand per kilowatt peak installed, we can release about 2.5 million.
So that must have been
funding.
What,
this
2009?
was 2008, 2009.
Yeah, yes.
When you basically,
because when I started in the April 2010, the very first system I sold was round about 4.5 to 5,000 pounds.
Yeah.
It was, in fact, I think it might have been over 20 grand for a 4 kilowatt system.
Yeah.
But that was in the days we didn't have a full supply chain.
No.
So we had a few companies buying in containers. Ours were coming in from Jordan, Philadelphia Solar. They're just about, they've got their MCS. They're going through sustainability traces and all the rest of it. Hopefully we introduce them. Good panel, good company. We were literally going over to Rotterdam in transits.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're lucky we're on the East Coast, you know, and we were bringing the panels and inverters, and the inverters, we were bringing them in from New Zealand, the ones we had. The Ena Solar, mine's still working. Lovely inverter, that is. We didn't have the likes of Seagen Seagen were one of the first.
Yeah.
Well,
Solar Century was a wholesaler. It was this bizarre model where you're out there and you're winning projects, and they were finite. You had the major demonstration program. First off, that was Tony Blair's pot of money. That closed prematurely. So building a spike followed by a boom, then a not a bust, but a major drop and uncertainty. Then the low carbon building program came in, another capital grant funded for the public sector, your hospitals, your schools, fire stations.
Well, they were doing a lot of thermal as well, weren't they? Where they got big heat demand and big hot water demand, filling the roofs with tubes, weren't they?
Yeah. So you're starting to be, what I wouldn't describe it as an industry and a market, but there was activity.
I felt it when I joined in the March 2008. I turned up in this office in a suit, went my 2-day training course on. I had to survey and solve thermal solar.
Yeah.
And I had to size it up and make the calculations. I felt it was an exciting industry.
Yeah.
I didn't realise it was so small. Apparently, there was only about 4 to 500 in 2008. There was 400 to 500 people in the UK who were fully employed in solar.
Yeah.
The rest of them were plumbers and technicians who done a little bit chain, and they were learning, but they were mainly their plumbers, electricians and roofers. There was only 400 to 500 full-time doing nothing but solar. That was quite exciting to be part of that.
Yeah.
And then to see where
it's gone. Yeah.
Mate, today for 20 grand, we could take someone off grid.
Pretty much.
We can take someone off grid. Battery to die for. I mean, yesterday's job, 18 grand.
Yesterday, didn't we? Yeah.
18 grand, 32 kilowatt hour battery, 8 kilowatt inverter. 28. He's having about 12 kilowatts of solar in that house.
Yeah. It is. It's a different world. I mean, the technology's matured.
And then you drive home over night time. And you plug your car in.
Yeah. It's all doable. It is all doable now.
And when he runs his heat and his air source heat pump, his reverse refrigeration unit, it's all coming from either solar or battery.
Yeah.
And if there's no solar, he puts cheap energy, which hopefully has been generated by wind, back into the battery. But I was reading, is it this week, 40% of electricity demand across the whole of last year globally. 40% was generated by renewables and low carbon sources.
And that is phenomenal.
We're not even touching that. That doesn't include the transport side.
Right.
Okay.
Right,
that is your domestic resident across the whole of, your electrical use for ordinary. It's going to get, for transportation, we've got to decarbonise. I mean, you could remove 25% of the world's pollution straight away from transport if we just stop transporting oil from the Middle East through the Suez into Europe. 25% of the carbon pollution. But they're talking about now these new ships, aren't they? they're going to emulate what the Egyptians were doing 4,000 years ago, because the Egyptians were the first people to use wind power.
Okay.
They found that wind could propel them up the trade routes on the Nile up towards the Med.
Sailboat. Right.
And that's the first sailing transport 4,000 years ago.
40% is phenomenal. It's remarkable when you think the level of demand.
Oh, listen, 15 years ago, there was 500 of us in this industry. And now, how many thousands?
I actually don't know, but it must be.
Everybody's in renewables. You go on LinkedIn, everyone's a renewable energy expert. Everyone's a specialist.
Is there 4,000 registered installers?
There's 4,500. I think there's 5,500 registered installers.
30, 40,000.
4,500 of them are solar or solar and air source. There's 5,000 in total, so that would suggest that there's round about 1,000 that haven't registered for solar, but they're doing the air source, the ground source, and the biomass, but they're not PV specialists.
But renewables was always jobs rich, and that was why I never understood more governments didn't embrace it and with far more ambition, because it is so jobs rich. So it's
there's
kind of
37 million electric connection points in the UK, and we've only connected 1.8 million of them.
Yeah.
We got enough work for and then we've got the remedial and repairs. You've got your Baird. There are so many associated business spin-offs that you could run from from the solar industry.
Yeah. But with that 60% still to go, the challenge is, particularly in the age of AI, which has a horrific water and energy.
Where's the likes of bloody Greg Jackson? He's trying to put pressure on the government for this regionalised pricing, and then he wants to build data centres.
Right, yeah.
Who's going to benefit from that?
I mean, I know people that are very close to the data in terms of renewables contribution, the real contribution, and the amazing stuff that we're achieving in terms of displacing fossil fuels is pretty much all displaced by data centers. And that's before we've really got going with AI. I mean, the footprint of that stuff is horrific. So that we need to be very careful. We've moved away from energy efficiency.
This is why people are reading the newspaper. It really annoys me, it's greenwashing. He's got this really great argument because he's got the support of the people that we've sent his way. Our industry and the car industry has built his business. That's what it is. And they've been very innovative. And they've got their technicals out in every department. They're house builders, they're car the cars, you name it. The solar installation company now, apparently. Apparently they're experts.
Right.
Oh, they're expert solar installers now. Try asking them to do a slate roof. Yeah. But when a man who runs a company like that has the influence that they have, when he openly says that he admires the likes of Elon Musk, you know there's only one way he's going. I did challenge them, they took the blog down, but I screenshotted it.
Right.
So I know his thinking behind what he's doing. But to me, it sounds like he's positioning for the data centers because that is where his money is going to be made. He's looking to become one of those billionaires. But that's what venture capitalists do, and they literally latch onto anything that makes them popular in the first instance. And at the moment, it seems to be solar and renewables.
I mean, Mike said,
and it's quite scary the amount of energy we are going to need for data centers. I mean, each data center is like it needs the same size power as a small town, a 35,000 populous town.
You see, Dublin,
that's a lot of energy.
Dublin's done really well in terms of attracting the big tech, particularly the US big tech companies. So a lot of them are based.
Yeah, but that was because of the corporation tax policy.
It was,
but
the
tiger economy.
Tiger economy, but that was driven by property, but certainly 10% corporation tax was very attractive. So that's worked really well. But what you now have is, I think they're pretty much on a trajectory this decade. By 2030, 30% of all consumed electricity in Dublin will be data centers. Now, if you think the amount of hospitals, housing, there is a lot of business, there is a lot of commerce, there's banks.
Just for some venture capitalists to trade
through the data centers.
To trade, they're trading what you watch, what you look at, and they're selling that to the people who sell you things, and good God.
But the challenge, I think, is as the technologies become more affordable, as the price of goods supplied electricity has got higher, you've got this very, very attractive economic profile, but we have lost sight of energy efficiency.
On policy, there should be a policy then. Instead of the grid being upgraded for these places, how about if you are going to take more than a megawatt a week or whatever, you have got to supply that. You've got not just tick a box for energy efficiency of the building, but you've got to supply a percentage of your energy demand. And if that means wind,
well, a lot of the planning rules in the early days that were drivers, they existed. But my concern is we've lost sight of energy efficiency, and by that I mean it is now so cheap to produce clean electricity.
Oh, might as well get a hot tub. Oh, might as well get a hot tub.
And yet, when it was prohibitively expensive, the first thing he did was, how do I minimise my demand for electricity? Now that I'm producing some of mine, how do I use that most efficient? We've kind of lost sight.
No, okay. So I'm really strong on this one with my own customers. It's slightly different. It's not a financial thing they're making here. It's a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
So for me, I had my last solar system on the house with the batteries fitted a year before the feed-in tariff scheme was coming to an end.
Right.
So I never claimed a feed-in tariff because I knew something else was going to be happening, but we didn't know what. We've got the smart export guarantee.
Yes.
When I'm sitting here in the shed doing a consultation, if I'm talking to you as a customer, I say, well, Mr. Baird, let me show you the savings. Oh, and then you've got your feed-in tariff. I would, being me, explain my feed-in tariff. You wouldn't have been getting that.
No.
And I didn't know what you were going to be getting. Yeah. So by the time the smart export guarantee come in, myself and Harriet had retrained ourselves to use 100% of our energy. So I don't want to give anybody anything. Yeah. But one of the things, occasionally you can't help it. The car's full. You got your timer settings wrong, or it's 3 weeks of sun. The car's full, battery's full, you're running on sunshine, it's not costing you anything. All your energy is going down the grid. So we come up with an idea a couple of years back. It was a conversation on Twitter with a few people, and because I've got a bit of a profile and a bit of following, I'd done a video and sent it out there, and it was about sharing your solar. So if I don't want to claim a smart export guarantee, this during the energy crisis, the people I used to police on these 1-bedroom flats, and they're paying 10% of their energy bill, so people can have their feed-in tariffs, but they can't afford the beans on their toast. If I generate 1,000 kilowatts that goes down the grid, if that was a customer in the same energy company, I think I should be able to say to that company, credit those 1,000 kilowatt hours against that person's bill.
Right.
Hashtag share your solar.
Right.
Yeah, I just thought that was a really nice thing to do. And we pushed it. And Octopus, in fairness to them, they picked up on it, and they have introduced a very similar scheme. But I think this is something that all governments should be legislating. They've been legislating for a smart export guarantee. They should give the people who are entering into the contract, there should be a clause in there where we can nominate a recipient. Of either the remuneration or the kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
I just think it's a really, and with modern technology, it's not hard for them to work
software,
out.
Bit of code. Yeah.
From a non-coder's point of view, it's easy to say, just a bit of code, mate.
Plus, particularly within the residential space.
Couple of hours work.
In the residential space, I think one of the easiest or simplest ways, not easy, the simplest ways to drive energy efficiency, and as in reduce demand for electricity, is depending on the number of people in the household. That's the basic metric for the calculation. But everyone gets a certain amount of free electricity every year. Maybe as little as £200, 200 units per person, per dwelling. Then the next 500 units, there is a below cost price.
And then over 1,000.
When you hit the average, you're kind of then essentially paying the average. And then as you use more and more, it gets more prohibitively expensive. I think that would refocus the mind on how do I reduce the actual
rather
use.
Than the low users having to go on a key card paying more per kilowatt hour. It's the exact opposite.
Incentivize lower consumption of electricity through behavioural change, through the use of technology, etc., but just have a really simple
I like one of the things, I know it's a bit of a sales line, but it actually rings true. I say to people, look, if you go for that size battery, you're still going to be sending a load of energy back to the grid. So I suggest that you turn it into an income stream yourself.
Yes.
Now, what do you mean? And I say, well, look, we live in a village and we've got a plant stall out the front.
Yes.
Where you live, you've got lots of passing traffic. I suggest you have a phone and portable device charging station for traders.
Yeah.
Can you just imagine years to come, you've got builders turning up in the street, oh, good God, I ran out of power on my phone. Oh, I know, there's a local charging station in Magdalen. And they go and pull up. They can press the one-cut machine. Doesn't cost nothing for the electricity because that's all being supplied. They can charge their phone on a fast charge for half an hour, and you can get paid £1 for a car charge. But people will start doing sharing their solar. Somebody's going to have solar at one house, they have it next door. There is going to be times when they throw an extension lead over and say, oh, mow your lawn with that electricity. It's all free, Mrs. Jones.
Yeah.
That's quite exciting to know how communities will we trade a barter community in our village, you know. So Teresa's got the eggs that we sell, so we get free eggs. We get kindling from Trevor John's. They get plants or jams and jellies from us. I think
it's the way it always used to be.
We get so much hot water. We get so much hot water. We give away buckets of it for 50 pence at the front gate. I'm joking, we don't. But I reckon we could come in for a free bath, Mrs. Jones. We could make a killing on that.
Yeah, but no, certainly that sharing of energy is key now, because we know we can generate. We know we can store.
Well, it's all generated.
Smarter.
It's all generated from something we all share.
Yeah.
The sun and the wind, it's all generated from what is available to all of us. And it's not just on this country, globally.
Yeah. I mean, that was the Jeremy Rifkin model of the third industrial revolution. So the 20% renewables target, that was pillar one.
Yeah.
So basically dip your toes in, start the industries, but chase your 20% target. Once you've hit that, you've got your industry started, you've got a level of familiarity with the technologies, then you just max out. You cover every available roof with solar.
Right. Well, that's the big thing at the moment. So, in the Solar Nation, we are forming a mindset, and one of them is about the fields for food policy. Now, we all would love to do a 5 megawatt or a 10 megawatt. For a small company like me to get that opportunity, that's like my swan song, and that's good. But it's not going to happen. I'm not the designer of those O&M, but we're connected to people who are.
Yeah.
We had a chat about this last night, so just going to pick something we were talking about. We were having quite a serious chat about this sort of stuff. You know, you go in and you can put, let's say, a 50 megawatt solar system in an area, and that might affect 20 different villages and parishes, little hamlets, and they're all up in arms. Whereas each of those parishes have got a little bit of municipal land, be it a couple of acres. We've got allotments. We've got playing fields. They're always struggling to fill the allotment spaces, especially in the villages, not the towns, but in the villages they are. They've got playing fields which are so dry they're cracking up. We've had to plant trees on ours. We planted a wood, the Millennium Wood, because the playing, you could put your arm down the cracks where the ground is just so dry around here. It's the fens. But if each village, which has got a substation,
and most will have,
much shorter connection points, no hassle about the big transformation or the lines. And we make a series of local grids of no more than 1 megawatt. 1 megawatt needs 3.5 acres nowadays. We've gone from 5 acres a megawatt of solar because the panels were 250 watt panels. Now with today's panels at 450 and 500 and more.
Sort of 600.
The stuff that you can't get on the roof because they're too big on roofs, but you can get on frames on fields. We can get a 5 megawatt system for 3.5 acres. I don't think there's many villages that haven't got that. Can you imagine if and that 1 megawatt system at 3.5 acres is going to have the community ownership value. They've planted the screening, the wildflower meadow. They've been allowed to put their cattle or their chickens or their sheep underneath it to moor it, or to encourage the biodiversity. It's at the end of the school playing field where the kids can do eco-environmental science and studying. There's benefits from that, and nobody's impacted by these smaller farms. But we're all impacted by one farmer and one energy company and an aggressive solar company who wants to do a massive field. So I think we because I was reading a report recently. So Damien from Renergy's done a lot of this, and a few other guys, like Gary from Perfect Sense as well, where they've done the calculations where less than 5% of commercial rooftop space in the United Kingdom are covered at the moment. Less than 5%. Now, we see our feeds full of LinkedIn every day, and it looks glorious. We know what we're doing. But people don't spend all the time on Google Earth like we do, looking at rooftops. I know 1 in 3 factories in King's Lynn have got solar on certain industrial estates. I know that. Because I've done them. Nobody else knows that unless we put it in the paper. But if we were to fill 80% on the assumption that 20% of them have got asbestos and they need to be roofing, if we filled 80%, we could hit 50% of UK electricity demand through the course of daylight hours and send stuff back to the grid.
Which is where a lot of the demand is as well.
And we haven't impacted. We haven't impacted on the ground, the visualization. We haven't had to increase the grid. There's very few factories are refused. They might get refused export,
Yeah.
but they're not refused the amount of energy they can generate. And and if they've got transformers and substations either on site or one of the industrial sites, we've got the grid services.
Yeah.
We can do the backup. We don't need these bloody great big multi-billion watt or multi-megawatt battery farms into the grid. We can do it at a regional and local level.
Yeah. That more granular approach is key because that's the whole beauty of distributed energy.
We've got to go down that way.
Away from the distribution and transmission losses by centralising it, and the roof is the perfect.
The system, the whole of our electricity transition was distributed. It was designed as a one-way distribution network.
One push to many.
That's what we're working with. So with solar, we know we can do it smaller, but at scale.
Yeah. Yeah,
and to me, that's
the localization.
To me, that is. I think that should be something that all of us, when we're going to our policy meetings, be it talking to university students, be it doing education in the street. If you're standing with this is for solar installers now. When you're standing at your garden centre on a Saturday morning, nicking a lead from Mr. and Mrs. Muggan's got to buy a solar powered fountain, and you're standing there handing out leaflets. That's the sort of conversations that we need to be having. The amount of people who say, "Oh, fields are for food." Yeah, they are. I agree. Yeah, but you're a solar company. Well, let's have that conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's a conversation we all have every day. It's another barrier to rapid rollout.
Yeah.
Every time the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Telegraph come out with their spouting nonsense, that puts the mindset up against what we're doing again. Why is it that people who are anti-solar are always anti all those other things as well?
Yeah, well, I think the solar thing is because it represents the greatest.
They're not anti-solar. They're actually, I call them nowadays the pro-climate change lobby, the pro-mass extinction lobby.
Yeah.
Because that's where we're heading.
Yeah.
So go on. So solar then, where do you see solar's place in all of what we're doing? I mean, I know you, but I want you to say it to other people. You're a little bit more focused on it than I am, I think.
Well, I think just the mass wholesale solarization of every single economy without exception is a good start point because it's just pure win. If we accept there is a footprint, it's still a lower footprint compared to the
it's embedded. We're not burning constantly.
But the jobs that it's still sort of a threefold difference: renewables versus fossil fuels in terms of each new gigawatt of generation. And it's just the simplicity. I mean,
where we can't do that until all of the global financial structures that have been built in the last 100 years on derivatives, oil and mining. Now, obviously, mining, but oil. That's where our pensions are. Universities divested from the oil pension funds about 9 years ago. That was the kickstart of a transition of divestment. The universities done it first. Government pensions have come out of oil. When the banks come out of oil, when the big pension houses stop investing in oil, that to me is when we'll see that sort of change. But until the pensions can find something as lucrative.
Again, it's still in terms of the real action right now. Yes, there's no shortage of capital. It's what you invest in. But I'm talking about the individual, the business, the church hall, the community.
Right.
En masse, there's finance available if you don't have the
we've got
en masse.
In the network,
everything.
We've got a PPA fund and all the rest of it. The whole of the industry is awash with money at the moment. BlackRock are now investing a massive amount. Barclays, and it's not the old Barclays Capital Finance program. It's Barclays Bank. It's them. It's BlackRock. These and the big pension. They're now putting their money in. So they're doing a lot of these lease deals. You got your power purchase agreements, which are always good. So the savings that people make will always be greater than the loan, lease, or PPA repayment.
Especially with a high grid supplied retail price now. In the past, that was a claim that was very difficult.
Without the extra feed-in tariff, because it used to be feed-in tariff plus, wasn't it? Now we don't have that reward mechanism.
And your savings were less valuable because today we're paying 30p for a unit of electricity.
Exactly. So solar prices are down, energy prices are up. So we don't need the subsidies there anymore, and that makes it a better base for investment because of the volatile price of electricity, which are only going to go one way. I mean, saying that, contradict myself, 2 years ago when energy prices were up here, that massive boom that we saw, every single person bought for the first time since I've known this industry a depreciating asset.
Right.
because we've gone from 48, 50 pence a kilowatt hour down to 28 pence a kilowatt hour in April last year, or October last year. Prices have come right down, haven't they? So it's going to, now they're starting to go back up.
You've still got a nice tipping point where the price of goods, it's still incredibly expensive.
For people who bought up until the Putin ripped off his shirt and walked into Ukraine, all of those people had a boom time for 2 years, and that they're still getting a little bit more in savings than what they were pre.
But your residential scale solar is delivering essentially a proportion of your electricity essentially fixed at about 10 to 12p.
That's what you're doing for 25 years.
And on the commercial space, that could be as low as 4 or 5p.
Yes.
So you can actually model it and potentially say 40% of your.
Can you imagine if years ago, if we knew what we know now about what we're doing? I mean, I remember we talked yesterday about the size of batteries.
Yeah.
I mean, we were all putting 2.4 and 4.8 kilowatt batteries in, and even today, there's so many people out there putting a little tiny 5 kilowatt battery. So most people out there are having a battery, but don't understand the size. It's not being sized for them.
Yeah.
7 years ago, I put a 9.6 battery in, and everyone's gone, Kev, that's far too big. You've only got a 4 kilowatt solar system. How are you not going to fill that? What are you going to do with that? Yeah. And within days, I was still exporting energy after the battery was filled. Yeah. And then in the evening, we were clearing the battery out, and we were bringing energy in from the grid. Yeah. So we bought another 2 on there.
That's where the surplus is as well, night time. You're actually doing the grid a favour by mopping up some of that cheaper surplus.
Yes. So what we then done was we extended the battery, got it up to 14.4 kilowatts. And I've only got 12 kilowatts usable because you've got to leave some. Yeah. But that then got me to the tipping point where I could still send energy back to the grid. Not a lot, just a small amount. Not that I want to, because I'm trying to do my pure solar thing. But I was no longer taking energy from the grid between sunset and sunrise. Yeah. And when the sun comes up again, it was provided.
Starts again.
We went for a whole month in, I think it was June 2022, where the most I ever took in a day was 9 kilowatt hours. And that was the day where we got the new electric car, 2023 it was, in June. We've got the new electric car, and I buggered up the timer settings on the charger. And I ended up taking 9 kilowatt hours from the grid one day. Every other day was between 180 watts and 450 watts for a whole month of June. Yeah. Well, we were conscious of what we were doing that month.
Yeah.
But going forward, though, we're going to get more and more climate-related disasters and heat waves and all the rest of it. Several factors with solar. First of all, you're actually reducing the heat build-up in your loft and in your house when you put solar panels on. There's the first thing. So it keeps the house slightly cooler. Yeah. But also, if village halls had solar, I really like the idea, and I really want to push on the idea of cooling hubs. Like the government introduced heating hubs when we had the energy crisis. Yeah. Everyone go to the library, leisure centre. But can you imagine a village hall is used the local taxpayers' money, the local ratepayers' money to buy solar and an air source heat pump, air conditioning. And then it gets to 40 degrees, 35 degrees, and we say, right, we're going to open up the doors and we're going to whack the aircon on full. And we've got a massive, great big village hall, and it has 100 people, and we've got kettles.
We're going to chill everyone out.
It's going to cost us nothing. Yeah. Instead of all those old people all putting fans on and small portable air conditioning units, all drawing loads and loads of energy and dying on their own, they can all go together. Yeah. And what happens when you get old people in a room together? Like jumble sales will start. They'll have cake sales. They'll be doing things for the village. Just like the war did. Yeah. Solar could actually reinvigorate communities out of a crisis. When you look at once you've got free energy,
and it is coming. You know, I think we've been discussing this over the last couple of days, and it's certainly a conversation I have a lot. We've almost certainly missed the boat in terms of addressing that. We're into a runaway scenario sooner or later. Hanging on to
we were fighting for years, weren't we? We were fighting for years to stop climate change.
Yeah.
In essence, that's what we were aiming to. That was our mindset. We've accepted several years ago that we're too late.
Missed the boat.
We missed the boat. I mean, governments globally have done this. We've missed the boat. We've been influenced by the fossil fuel lobby. They're in bed with the media, which forms the mindset of the people who vote, of the people who buy. They make the purchase decisions. And people listen to me, they're always going to go for solar. Yeah. If they read the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Sun, and they're on one of their pro-climate change anti-Greta,
Yeah.
anti-Just Stop Oil. I'm the devil.
Yeah.
They're not going to buy from me
climate
because
denial,
they've been told.
climate change denial is probably more prevalent now than I have been aware of. I would say in the last possibly 30 years.
Look, people, it's very hard for people to find out what the truth is nowadays, though, because everyone's online. So people don't believe the things that they see. We were talking about this yesterday. The things that you see with your own eyes, and they still don't believe it.
Yeah.
We know what's happening here. I know that the Environment Agency spent £300,000 on my front garden building a permanent flood defence from that tidal river. There was issues.
It's very impressive.
Oh, it looks lovely.
Yeah.
And thank you very much indeed. Mr. Taxpayer, you've contributed to it. But what we've also done is made sure that England gets its Weetabix.
Yes.
Because the Fens would flood. If that breach, that is a part of the tidal river which hadn't been enforced. It was starting to collapse in the road. It's now been secured. The Fens will not flood from the River Great Ouse.
Yes, yeah.
So that's all. So I see firsthand and upfront. My magnolia tree, we bought that the year we moved here. And it went in because my dad died on St. George's Day, and that flowers on St. George's Day.
Yeah.
St. George's Day is still 2 weeks away, 10 days away, 11 days, whatever. And the flowers are already starting to drop.
Yeah.
Not bloom.
Yeah.
The bloom's been. We're a month early.
Yeah.
On all the plants, the budding, the fruit trees are round about a week early this year from usual, but we haven't had our water butts are dry, and we've got 2,500, 3,000 litres of water here.
Yeah.
They're dry.
Yeah.
There's cracks in the ground. We're only just out of March.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What's this summer going to be like? It's
unpredictable. Very unpredictable.
So what about where you are then in Northern Ireland? Are you at sea level?
We're way above sea level. So North Coast, County Antrim, sort of 10 minutes from the coast, the Atlantic, very clean, cold.
Cliffy.
Atlantic, yes. Yeah. Beautiful scenery.
See, we're very slopey. You're cliffy, we're slopey.
Yeah. Mile outside the local village, on our own plot.
Are you growing your own food?
There's a little bit of that. It ebbs and flows. It's one of the hardest things to even grow a meaningful proportion of your own food.
Oh, it's hard work.
Huge amount of work.
You've either got to be extremely well planned.
Yeah.
And then it's really simple.
Yeah.
Or you've really got to work at it.
Yeah.
I'm lucky. I've got a harem here. I've got two women.
Yeah.
So I've got my wife and mother-in-law.
Yeah.
We all, for people who don't know, when we moved up here 20 odd years ago, it really was for the good life. So Elizabeth, my mother-in-law, sold her house. We sold ours. 2 houses in London, all moved into a house. None of us could have afforded on our own. But the idea was to have 3 generations under one roof because I'm tight. 1 electricity bill, 1 council tax bill. We don't need 3 cars between 3 of us when we're all here, 2 is maximum. But the boys had someone older person to look after them. Older person had youngsters around, and we've all learned ourselves. So we've got the fruit orchard, we've got the food beds, and we do a lot of the jams and jellies, and we do batch cooking and all the rest of it. But for those people getting into it, I mean, there are simple stuff you can just do in a pot, do you know what I mean? But you're right.
Irish cooking is very much
in a pot.
That it's pretty simple.
But you can get your carrots, you can get your leeks, you can get your potatoes.
Best potatoes in the world. Ireland's
when you've got them.
Best potatoes. Well, yes.
I shouldn't. Sorry.
Best potatoes in the world. Close to the sea as well. Natural seasoning of the land, and it's certainly our farming is a lot less intensive. I'm not saying that there is. So there's a lot of, particularly on the pig and the poultry side, because globally the demand for pig and poultry is...
around here, the pigs around here nowadays. Lots and lots of farmers are going over the pig. There's Chinese, they all want their pork now. They've turned from being rice eaters, now they've got affluence, and 50% or more are living in the cities. They're now meat eaters. Again, that is carbon intensive.
Yeah. Was it 800 million people taken out of poverty over the last 20 years in China? That's been
it's absolutely astronomical what's going on. And the scale of what they're doing on renewables, they're putting twice as much as the world combined up each year.
Yeah.
Twice as much.
But that's the pursuit of energy independence, and it's interesting versus imported Russian coal and European gas. Basically, they've gone for energy independence, and it's It's an interesting way to approach it. I have historically not been anti-Chinese, but very pro-European
Yes.
solar manufacturing.
Yes.
So about 2012, there was the article in one of the magazines. We'd lost the feed-in tariffs. Suddenly, the industry had no story to share because the only story the mass industry knew was one of a return on capital invested.
And the dumping of products by the Chinese.
5 years of, well, there wasn't a return on capital. There was all the other reasons you would go solar. Then, of course, the price sort of dropped. Feed-in tariffs disappeared. A lot of markets disappeared. China always maintained this absolute focused pursuit of energy independence. So, for instance, the ebb and flow of the market, if demand starts to fall away, the Chinese government will keep the factories running, even if that means just shipping modules, building ground mounts without a grid connection.
Yeah.
Because it's far better to keep the factory turning over, keep people employed, keep the economy turning, because at the end of the day, there will always be
that is the beauty of where you have got control. I think even the most democratic and free countries in the world could be a little bit more forceful.
Where's the
with
consistency?
Some of the things. They're not doing something for a short-term 5-year policy to get the votes next time. They're doing it for the benefit of the people in 60 and 100 years' time. They got a history of doing things like that with walls.
Yeah.
And they've got temples that it took 1,000 years to build.
Yeah.
It's not just a case of let's do it because it's populist, which is a Western way of thinking, short-termism. Because money is our goal rather than energy independence.
Yes. Yeah. And they'll get, I believe they'll get there first. And when you consider the size of that economy,
have you seen what Modi about 8 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever, he came up with India's going to do this, India's going to do that. And you still see it from people online, my academia and things. India went all out on solar-powered railways.
Right.
The Dutch have now got solar-powered railways, so all the electricity. But in India, they've also gone for the canals. Now, a lot of people live close to canals and rivers. So there's a massive amount of evaporation.
Yes.
That people Ganges and all that. Massive amount of evaporation. So what they're doing is, and they're doing it in California now as well, they cover the canals with solar.
Less evaporation.
And you got electricity at the source where people are.
Yes. Yeah.
They're building new grids. That's in India.
Yeah. Floating solar has been obviously around for years.
This covers over canals, so the solid ground mount over a canal, like a channel. But floating solar, the Japanese and the Chinese, they are pushing the boat out on that.
In a big way.
I mean, I've worked out, as I said before, I can do 89 megawatts between Kingsland and Downham on that river without impacting on the land. And we've got substations all the way along the villages.
Yeah.
Such an easy thing to do. But this thing up at Constructionarium up on the coast, where we've taught them how to build floating solar ready reservoirs. So when the construction engineers are building reservoirs for the farmers to do the water, we've actually got floating solar on there, which, because the pumps are heavy demand.
Yes.
And they only get to abstract twice a year under license, but they lose a third of that water.
Yeah.
That can all be stopped.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can all be stopped. It is a solution to so many things. It's not just a blot on the landscape. And that's today's paper. I was reading the Lynn News earlier about Breckland Council. They're actively seeking arable farmland to meet what Ed Miliband's asking for.
Okay.
It's wrong. They should be encouraging local villages and local communities, us as taxpayers, business taxpayers, ratepayers in that local community, do not want to see acre upon acre and acre and acre. But we will appreciate and admire an adequately sized solar farm, an acre, half an acre, 2 acres.
Connected at the point of use is the key.
It's all about the point of use.
Max out. The rest of the stuff is part of the mix, and it's important.
And we can fund those as well. We can fund it. You don't have to put your hand in your own pocket. You just have to sign the bloody paperwork.
Yeah. And the idea that you're building an industry where a local industry is serving the local demand en masse across.
We have that. We have that argument in Solar Together and all these other schemes that go on as well. I'm not going to bore with them today. That'll be another story for another podcast another time.
Yeah.
Andy, I've really enjoyed this chat.
Yeah, it's been good.
I haven't got a clue if this is still recording or how long we've been talking. I haven't got a clue.
Yes.
And I'm not going to edit it either.
Right.
We're just going to have a look at it back, make sure it's okay, and then I'm going to press upload.
Right.
And by the time you get back to Northern Ireland tonight, it might be online.
Very good. Well, look,
this has been a brilliant chat.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks for your hospitality over the last
Mate,
couple
it's
of
been
days.
really good.
Pleasure to see
It's been
you
good to
as well.
catch up, but it's just having this chat on camera,
Yeah.
so people see a bit of insight.
Yeah.
It's good. I'm gonna go and turn the camera off now.
Cool. Take care. Later.